Welcome to my YouTube channel where we demonstrate and discuss everything related to theatrical and entertainment production crafts. Please subscribe to get the latest updates, posts, and demonstrations. While I will focus primarily on safety in the shops and comprehensive training and operating procedures for tools and machinery, I'll also demonstrate and discuss practical applications like flat and platform construction, scene painting, and more. If you'd like to see something specific, please let me know in the comments. Once again, please subscribe and power up the alert bell to get the most up-to-date notifications about new content. As a reminder, always seek out training from the shop supervisor or the technical director before attempting any task or demonstrations in this video. If you have never performed a task that I discuss or demonstrate, especially if it is one of the more advanced tasks or operations, you should only attempt them under the supervision of the shop supervisor or the technical director, especially if it is your first time doing so. If you haven't done something recently or would like a refresher, ask to be retrained or have the shop supervisor or technical director supervise you performing the task. As always, be safe in the shops, on stage or backstage, or in the production support areas. This is the 10-inch version of our bandsaw, also a Rikon. I like the Rikon brand, it's very good. I've also been happy with the Grizzly brand. There's a lot of varieties of other brands available, Powermatic and some other things too. This one takes 120, and there's an outlet right here on the corner. I've also hooked up the dust collector. So that we can have dust collection with it while we're operating it. But I'm not going to use it while I'm talking. All the same principles are the same. It's got two levers to open it up, a little tiny baby wheel with tiny baby tires, tiny baby blade, and the same with down below here. Bandsaw instructions are attached to this tool. It's a little bit more mobile. This one has a 3/8 inch blade, I'm gonna think, or no, it's about a 1/4 inch blade. That looks like about a 1/4 inch blade. So I'm gonna be able to cut some pretty fine curves on that. What does my chart say here? 1/4 inch blade. I can cut a 5/8 inch radius with the 1/4 inch blade. That's pretty tight. That's pretty tight. I'm going to be cutting 3/4 inch pine. So I need to lower my guard down, and it's the same principle as the other Rikon. It's got a lock on this side and then a lever or a dial that brings it up and down. This doesn't have that big shield in it, so I can actually get a lot closer to my lumber without obscuring my cut. It's got the same principles here, two little side bearings. Bearings are behind the teeth, but they are not behind the teeth. Ooh. Now we need to adjust that. Why are they not behind the teeth? That is a pretty easy adjustment on that. It is slightly deflecting the blade. Not going to go through, oh no, I wasn't slightly deflecting. I was deflecting the blade with my wood. And when I pull it back, it's now where it's supposed to be. So now my bearings are slightly behind the teeth. I'm going to investigate the bottom, and it looks okay. We can do straight cuts on this, but like the jigsaw, it's going to be hard to get a nice, consistent, even straight cut. It's probably not the best tool for your straight cuts. Something like a circular saw or the radial arm saw, and you can make your partial cut. You might have better success with a perfectly straight cut. We're going to be doing some curves with this. I'm going to draw some curves on my board and talk about different ways of doing it. If we're doing an outside curve, that's real easy. If it's gradual like that, I'm probably going to be able to make that cut with this blade. if it's something more dramatic, I'm probably not going to be able to cut that tight of a curve with this blade. So I'm going to have to do some fancy things. I'm going to probably cut this way, and then I'm going to cut in a series of cuts. That's going to create a layer of facets. And then for here, I'm going to do what are called relief cuts. I'm going to do a cut in like that, and that, and that, and that. And the same thing here, here, and here, and here. And those are going to then fall away when I come through with my blade. Ching, 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 ching. Ching, 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 ching. Those are your two guiding principles with doing small curves. And remember, I have to be progressing forward in order to curve. I can't just turn it in place and force it. That's going to twist the blade. It's going to pull the blade out of alignment. It's going to potentially cause the blade to break and other things. I'm going to cut this on this side because I don't think I have enough room to cut it on this side because my throat isn't big enough. If my goal was to get to the red line, I want to stop a little shy of it and then sand it the rest of the way, if that's my goal. I don't want to try and get perfect with this saw. I'm not going to make it perfect. It's too easy to slightly go off, and then you have to come and sand it. And if you sand it into your good part of your wood, then you're in trouble. Now we're going to make those relief cuts. As I'm making this cut, I'm going to be very conscious of where my hands are, where I turn, and when my hands are now in front of the blade. And if they are in front of the blade, I need to move my hands over here and get outside of the blade. I had to turn my board over to get those other cuts. Now, I don't have a line on the back side of my wood, but I did have those relief cuts, so I didn't cut past the relief cuts. It looks like I'm still pretty good. So now this has given me a lot of good range to be able to come back in with files, rat tail files, and sand that all down and hand file it down and get it exactly where I want it. It's going to take a little bit of work, but that's woodworking for you, right? Now with this other cut, I should be able to do this cut and follow the line pretty cleanly. So not here, this is bad. I couldn't do this last little bit because I was hitting back here. But I could have done this entire curve from this side if I wanted to. It's pretty clean, nice, clean little cut. Does seem to be deviating. It's not a perfectly straight up and down cut. Means I need some fine tuning to do with this machine. Unfortunately, this little guy doesn't stay in tune as much as the other one, and it has a much thinner blade, and it's been under tension the whole time. So the blade is probably a little stretched out, and I probably need to tighten it some more. But there's a limit to how far I can tighten this blade on this machine, because if I overstretch it too much, this wheel is going to eventually bottom out up here, and then I can't stretch it out anymore. So you do need to be a little bit gentle with the very thin blades and kind of be protective of them, because they do get damaged a little bit and stretched out and overworked a lot. So this is the tension that pulls the thing up and down. In the back here is a knob that tilts the top wheel forward and backward to get it aligned properly. And we'll do a separate video on setting up the blade. Being a first-time user, you're probably going to make some mistakes and pull the blade off the wheels and stress the blade out, break some blades, especially with the smaller one. It's going to happen. But try to follow the guidelines, try to be safe. We can do one more cut, get a little bit fun with it. See if we can do that cut with it. And again, every time I'm going to be turning, I'm going to be conscious of where my hands are. If the turn puts them in front of the blade, I'm going to change my position. And I'll be doing that on the fly without talking about it. Nice clean cut. Now remember, as I'm cutting this curve, I have to be progressing forward as I'm cutting the curves. I can't just stop and turn in place. There is no blade on the bandsaw that will allow you to do that. If you want to be able to do cuts like that, you need to get yourself a scroll saw and get yourself one of these spiral blades or other blades that will cut in any direction. The bandsaw only cuts in the forward motion. So you have to be progressing forward. Even if it's a real slow forward, you are progressing forward. And if it looked like I was turning in place in the video, it's because I was progressing forward very, very slowly. And this blade allowed me to just sort of creep around some of those tight curves. When I was demonstrating this one for the tool training video, I had a lot of deflection and deviation on the blade, and I came to think that maybe I hadn't checked the tension on the bandsaw blade, and that was why it was deviating and doing weird things with my curves and kind of cutting on an angle and not straight up and down. It's possible that I had taken the tension out of this. We've been dark for over a year. Just before going dark, I had to replace the tires. I had to replace the drive belt. Those things wore out, and I didn't want those things to be unnecessarily under tension. Although usually I would leave this one in tension because it is more likely that someone is going to come up and just use it off the shelf, and getting it back in tension when it's out of tension can be a tricky thing. So I usually leave it in tension. Let's take a look at this. This one doesn't have a tension gauge, so I like to see what sound it makes, and you can see by that deflection, it's got a lot of deflection. That tells me it's not in proper tension. It usually has a little bit more high-pitched twang. With the narrow blades, this one will stretch out the blade excessively. And I do have a limit here. So if I start getting close to the top of this casing, I've probably overstretched my bandsaw blade and I need to not use it, toss it, and go get a new one. I don't know if you can hear that on the video, but that is already a lot better and it's not moving around so much. So it could be that I took it out of tension a long time ago before our theater went dark for the pandemic. It could be that it's just been sitting here for over a year and it just stretched itself out because these thin blades and these thin small blades do that. It could be either one of those cases. In either case, it's going to behave much better now, and I'm going to be much happier with it. We're going to put it back down to the proper height for cutting 3/4 inch material. Right there, lock it down. And that's much better. My cuts are now straight. They're not deflecting at an angle. And that's just a much happier bandsaw. You kind of have to know if the saw is not in tension and if it's misbehaving or if it needs alignment. The bandsaw is quite tricky to keep track of all of these things. The tension, the blade has to be centered on the top and bottom wheels all the time. It has to be perfectly aligned with these guides and this guide and the lower guides. Any one of those things being slightly out of sync or out of alignment or out of precision tuning will cause it to misbehave and you'll have inaccurate cuts. It's easy to knock all those things out of alignment. You just need to learn to pay attention to all of them and learn to understand how they all work together. As a first-time user of this saw, we're not going to expect you to know all those things, but it is going to get knocked out of whack by you or by one of your other classmates in the class, and it's going to get knocked out. And if it's not behaving properly, come and get me or one of the other shop leads or your instructor and get one of us to put it back into shape and figure out what's wrong with it and realign all the things. And then it will, be good until the next time someone knocks it out. Again, this little Rikon, this little guy is also more likely to go out of alignment because the smaller bandsaws just do that. And the smaller bandsaw blades stretch out like I may have just discovered with this one. This table also has a tilt, and its tilt function is in the back. And it has the same sort of design as the other Rikon, the larger one. It has a positive stop here. So if I loosen this, hasn't been moved in a long time, there we go. And I tilt that and lock it into place, do my cuts, adjust my fence. And when I put it back, it should pop back to that positive stop. You see, this one's got a lot of play here. So it's got a lot of possibility for being out of the correct place. Not as finely designed as the bigger machine. The other one has more mechanisms in it to tilt it up and down. This one, I definitely do not want to muscle this around by this table. This trunnion on this saw is one of those cheaper metal trunnions. It's a pretty beefy one. It's better than I've seen on the home craftsman model machines, but it is still a pretty flimsy part, as opposed to this one is a much beefier machine. So never muscle it around by here. If I have to lift it off on and off of here, I need to grab it by this part or by this part or by the base or the motor, but never by the table. When I recorded the safety training video for the bandsaw, the basic operating procedures and all of the details of how to safely use the machine, I mentioned that I was going to demonstrate a task when I got to this smaller machine, and I didn't do it. And that is some more fancy tasks of how to cut curves in here where I can't turn that corner, but I also don't want to back out these really long distances. I don't want to do this long path and then back the blade out and risk pulling the blade off of the wheel. It's a really long path to back out. The common sense approach is to do the short one and back out the shortest amount possible and then come back and do the longer one. And then the piece falls out. So we're going to demonstrate that. When I get into the corner, that's when I want to back my blade out gently, carefully, without pulling it off. This is why backing it out while the blade is running can be problematic. It can quickly knock your bandsaw out of whack. I did have some trouble taking this corner, and I had to make it in short little steps and correct every step of the way. The little facet cuts, the tangent cuts. I could probably have cut this straight in and then come in this, and I would have had more play. So I had a couple of different options. I thought I could make this turn and do it just fine, but it was a little bit tight here on this outside curve. And maybe I just didn't have my technique down right. I wasn't turning right. I was advancing too fast without turning. You can't turn in the spot, but you can turn slowly and progress forward. I probably could have come in from here and gone straight into the corner and then had a less complicated backing out. And then I could have come here and cleaned that up. You've got multiple options. You've got to think through your project. You've got to think through your approach. You've got to think through all your steps ahead of time. It's not one step at a time. You've got to conceive of the whole and what would be the best approach to accomplishing it. Now I can go ahead and do this long one, and I should be able to do that. These are much slower curves. I should be able to do that, assuming I can maneuver my piece. Yeah, I'll be able to maneuver my piece. If not, might want to chop off a bit of this to get it ready. Now I've cut my piece, the two pieces fall apart, and I have successfully done this in the most efficient way for this machine and the most efficient way to keep from knocking my tool out of whack and out of adjustment. I did the shortcut first, and then I came back and I did this longer cut. I did have some trouble here. You can see where I'm following my line here. I always want to be just shy of the line. I don't want to be exactly on the line. If it's an important piece that I'm working on, I don't want to cut into my piece. I want to be just a bit away from the piece, and then I can sand back down to my line. But as I was coming in here, I miscalculated and I cut into my piece, and I don't have my line marked on my wood anymore. I did the same thing over here. I couldn't make that curve properly and get through there. I don't know if my blade's a little bit dull or if it's just too wide of a blade for this particular cut. But that's basically how you want to cut your pieces, where you've got a short run and a long run. You want to try to always plan your short run first. Sometimes you're going to have things that are laid out on the wood that are a little more complicated and a little bit more challenging. Now I should want to do this short run first and then come back and do the long run. But as you'll see, as I try to go into here, I'm not going to be able to pivot my wood to get into that corner because I'm going to hit there. So I'm probably going to do what I can. I probably marked this on the wrong side of the board. I probably should have marked it on the other side of the board. But let's figure out how we can get this cut and make it work. Because I think once this piece is gone, then I can do that. Or I could do that. I could chop a chunk of this off so I can get into the corner, but I'm not sure even if this chunk is gone, if I'm going to get into the corner. So I have a couple options. I could start here and then go as much as I can and then deviate from my curve and go down to here and let this whole waist piece fall away. And then I can come back and do this one, and then I've only got a little shorter run. I think I'm going to try that one. I'm going to try that, see what happens. couldn't quite make it into my corner where I wanted to get to, so I got the best I could. That was the best I could do because the board over here was in the way of the back side of the saw. Now I can finish this off. Still not going to be able to get in there. I can redraw this on the back side. Of course, it's going to be hard to do since I just sort of freehanded it. But if I had a template or something that I was working off of, I should be able to apply the template to the other side and get relatively close. And I could do the relief cuts from this side, and that will give me a line to follow on the other side when I flip it over. So I think I'm going to do that. Normally I would put my hand here, but I don't want to block the view of the video, so I'm going to put both my hands over here. Now I have my relief cuts. I should just be able to follow that. Bam, 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 bam. And those pieces should drop out. And the end result is I actually got pretty close to my line. I'm pretty happy with that. That's the normal amount that I would have to sand off and file off. So that's very good. Excellent. This is one of those home user model band saws. This one, the brand is American, and it's very similar to a model you might get from Powermatic or a number of other similar manufacturers. Powermatic is a good brand. They do make some big beefy machines, but they also make this 14-inch kind of middle of the road end user, home craftsman model version, and it's got some shortcomings. One of them is the mounts underneath here of how the table mounts to the frame. If I'm moving this around and I don't have the mobile wheelbase that I have here, I want to grab it by here or by here or by the frame, maybe get a hand truck, wheel it around with a hand truck. This one's small enough that I could move it around with a hand truck. What I don't want to do is come over here and wrench it around by the table. This is the one that I have done that with a long time ago. And the thing that I did, I broke this little piece, and that you can see is a slightly different color gray than the rest of the machine. And that's what was replaced. And these were cheap pot metal things that break real easily. So it's real easy to break these cast parts that aren't made out of really good quality industrial cast iron. You don't want to wrench it around. And we can see already this table is not even level, and that's because it goes out of adjustment real easily. The less you pay for your bandsaw, the harder it is going to be to keep it in alignment, most likely. This has the guides that are cool blocks, and you can see this is even out of alignment. This is supposed to be pushed behind the teeth. It doesn't go any further behind the teeth. So I actually need to adjust the blade so that it's properly centered on the wheel. I probably will pull this cover off and it's not properly centered on the wheel. But the first thing I want to do is I want to get this thing into square. And you can see it's not in square here at all. It's very, very far off. So I can loosen the front knob, and I can loosen the front and the back knobs, and I can do this back and forth and get it into square. It looks like it's also tilting a little bit forward, backward. I should have a better square for doing this, a tri-square or some smaller square, but this is all I have in the shop here, and that's a little too far. And then I want to tighten that down. And then as long as I don't muscle it around by the table, it should stay relatively square. There is no positive stop here. There is no way to come back to 0 easily. The old pieces did have a sticker on here with a gauge. The replacement parts did not come with the sticker. I'm even missing a mounting bolt. Wow. And so I have to trust and rely 100% on my measurement of my table to my blade. And that's probably a good thing. Sometimes if you've got stickers and alignments, it's good for getting you close. But unless you're keeping it in 100% fine tune, if you trust that to be accurate and it's slightly off, and you don't realize that till after you've cut dozens of pieces, then you kind of wasted a bunch of lumber, you wasted your time, you wasted money, you wasted a little bit of everything. So you can use this as a rough guide if it has a marking on it, like the tape measure on the rip fence of the table saw. But if you really want accuracy, you're going to do the measurements yourself and get the angle right, get the distance from the blade right with a tape measure. You're not going to trust those things to be 100%. The cool blocks on the bottom are also out of whack. Everything's out of whack on this bandsaw. Wow. So again, I loosen both knobs. And now I can tilt it about 5 degrees this way. And I can tilt it quite a bit this way. I think that's about it. That's about the maximum. Now, when I want to put it back to 0, I have to get out my square and square it up yet again. That's going to be a best guess. Again, a smaller square would be better to get more accurate. Now let's take a look at this and see how far off that blade is. Well, it's not far from center. It's a little bit far back, but because I can't take my cool blocks back any further, I really need to bring that blade farther forward. And I can do that by adjusting the tilt of the blade while rotating it. It's not plugged in. This is not something you will normally do as a beginner bandsaw user. I'm spinning it and I'm adjusting this tilt knob on the back. And as I'm spinning it, it's walking forward. And I want to walk it forward. And then I want to stabilize it. And my teeth now are just past the cool block. So I want to stabilize it right there. Make sure it's not going anywhere. The blade could be a little bit tighter. I don't use this a whole lot at home. There is no integral gauge showing what the blade tension is, so you just got to go by feel. And of course, don't go so far that I get my top wheel rubbing up against the device. So I would do that by hand, get it rough, and then I would plug it in and I'd turn it on and I'd visually watch it, because by doing it by hand, it's probably not going to walk and it looks like it's still going forward a little bit. It's still going forward, and I wouldn't know that until I turned it on and it came up to full speed. So we need to get it back a little bit. And now I'm a little bit still too far forward. My teeth are pretty good there, but now I'm way too far away from this back bearing, so I need to adjust that. And it's back and forth with this all the time as fast as it goes out of alignment. I haven't done a whole lot of woodworking with this machine. I've mostly done some styrofoam carving for some styrofoam props and headstones and things like that. If it's in good tuned shape, it should be able to do woodworking as well. And of course, the guard is way too high for anything, but that's probably what I was doing styrofoam the last time or something like that. So I bring it down to my level. You notice there's also a lot of play this way with this one, so that's going to affect my position. It's just not a fine piece of precision machinery, this bandsaw. Now I'm almost on top of my teeth again. Do have a little bit of adjustment here. No, I thought I pushed this all the way back. I should be able to go further back, but I'm hitting this guard. I think this device might be upside down. It looks like I've got a little more clearance on there. Don't think I can take it off without taking the blade off. Oh, look at that. I can't. Well, now it slides further back, so that would lead me to believe that that was put in upside down. Now I can get this aligned better because it will actually go behind my blade. They do make retrofit bearings and other guide mechanisms for all bandsaws, so if I really don't like these cool blocks, I can invest a little bit of money in them and replace them with bearings. But as you see, the whole mechanism is easy to move out of whack. I should get these cool blocks closer. This one on the left is not quite close enough. And of course, I need to still adjust my bearings. And I probably need to do all of the same in the bottom. Looks like this needs to go back a little bit. And this bearing will need to go forward. So lots of adjustments to do to get this back in shape. Bandsaws, very versatile tool, very useful. The low end home craftsman models, they're gonna be frustrating at times, but it's better than no bandsaw, right? Unplug the machine, dress the cord. Plug the dust collector in there. And this one has a dust cover. This one gets even used a lot less than the other one. Just trying to figure out which way is wider. It looks like this way. We use this bandsaw a lot like a scroll saw, this little guy. It's not a scroll saw, so like I said, it can't cut those super tight curves, but it can do a lot of stuff that a scroll saw can do, and really there's very little use for a scroll saw in a generic scene shop, but there might be use for a scroll saw in a property shop or something that's making a lot of fine detailed work.